Welcome to this edition of Faith to Live By. I'm Pam Christian, your host, where each week I help us explore current events from a biblical and prophetic perspective so we can discover truth and learn what God wants us to understand so we can remain in His protective care and provision. I'm called to be an advocate for truth, especially for God's people in these days of the most intense spiritual battle the world has ever known. Considering all the ministry work I've done since the early 90s, this task is by far the most difficult. I must do deep dive research through all these false narratives and political spins, which means I listen, read, and watch a tremendous amount of data in effort to help us discover truth. And in these days of incredible censorship, intentional diversionary narratives from the mainstream media, who is owned by the deep state, and professional and amateur journalists reporting events spewing speculations with as much sensationalism as possible, it is not an easy task. Because of the calling on my life, I will continue to do all I can to help us know the truth. But I ask you to understand, discovering truth is a process. We will not uncover all truth at one time. I also ask for your prayers and for any other support you can give as I work to help you, to help us all, learn what God wants us to know so we can do what He wants us to do. In everything I bring you, I go to great lengths to provide you with source information so you can see and consider matters for yourself. Please take what I bring you, listen carefully, and look at the substantiating sources I offer so you can be confident of what you conclude is worthy of your trust. It's evident we've all been lied to and controlled for a very long time. Independent, critical thinking is more important in these days than ever. I had today's podcast nearly done on Sunday, July 21st, when events of Monday, the 22nd, peaked, which meant I had to rewrite what I bring you. It is the intentions of the deep state, those who seek to control the masses, to cause us to be more confused than ever today. They want us to become so overwhelmed that we are immobile or so angered that we fight one another. We must not do either of those. The truth today is more difficult to know than any other time, but it is not impossible. We must all intentionally be critical thinkers and not make rash conclusions based on our emotions. We are presently faced with the unsuccessful assassination attempt on Donald Trump at the Butler, Pennsylvania rally, with the tragic loss of the life of Corey Compratore and all the conflicting subsequent investigations. We are also faced with the adamant insistence of Joe Biden that he would run for the 2024 presidential election, followed by his withdrawal, leading to members of Congress claiming if he's unfit to run, then he's unfit to finish his term. And we're faced with the unprecedented methods of the Democrats to identify their presidential candidate, providing evidence the party does not truly allow their members to have a candidate who is the people's choice. With all the fallout surrounding these issues, I promise you, the more we learn, the uglier it will get. Do not for a moment think we've seen the worst the enemy, deep state, has planned against us. No, through the prophets, God continues to warn us of more exposure of corruption and that we will see God bring judgment against the evil before our very eyes. The days we are in, which will last for a while, are going to be exceedingly difficult, but not impossible for us to endure while maintaining our confident hope in God to redeem and restore all things. I've shared my family has been enduring one of the most difficult issues ever for the past several months, and I thank those of you who have prayed for me. I've been praying for you too because I'm certain your life is very difficult during this very same time. In fact, all of my closest friends, every one of them, are experiencing unexpected and unusual hardships. This is evidence we are living in the most intense time of spiritual battle. We must see it for what it is. The enemy is trying everything he can to overwhelm God's people in our families, our jobs, our health, our finances, our churches, our schools, our governments, and the media. In fact, on every one of the 7 mountains of society. This is why God has been forewarning us. God wants us to be prepared in every way to not merely withstand the evil against us, but to partner with God to see His kingdom will done on earth as it is in heaven. This is not the time to let the enemy weigh us down. This is the time to be fully armored, according to Ephesians 6, and to be fully united as we stand together in faith, believing God will deliver us from it all. Today, I bring you part 2 of my interview with Donne Clement Petruska, daughter of the late well-respected prophet Kim Clement. And I want to point out that Donne's father was among the prophets to prophesy about both the assassination attempt on Donald Trump and President Biden's departure from office. However, before I play that interview for you, I want to provide some preliminary considerations of current events. This is not a time where we will have all the answers. In fact, we should expect to have more questions than answers in these days. But we can handle that, because we know every bit of everything the enemy attempts is certain to fail. We who belong to God are the victors even now because of what Christ has done and because of every promise of God. Amen. Regarding the assassination attempt against President Trump, this is not the first or the last, but it was one that was live-streamed by CNN, even though this was one of the smaller rallies held in Butler, Pennsylvania, with a total population of 13,000 people. In fact, to date, this Butler, Pennsylvania rally is the only one CNN has live-streamed. CNN has never covered a Trump rally before. Why were they present at this one? Were they tipped off that something was planned for this particular rally? The Secret Service, according to standards, was working with local law enforcement. However, reports are that the radio frequencies between local police and the Secret Service were not the same, preventing adequate communications between them. Whistleblowers have provided Senator Josh Hawley eyewitness accounts of inexperienced Secret Service agents and that the overall staffing was inadequate. Also, uninformed Secret Service staff included people who were actually agents of the Department of Homeland Security, lacking the same training as the Secret Service. And Senator Ron Johnson released a report of many substandard procedures of the Secret Service specific to that particular day. I encourage you to use the link in the show notes to see the preliminary findings by Senator Ron Johnson. Additional discrepancies we've learned about include early claims that there were no drones surveying the rally. When Director Cheadle was asked about the absence of drones at the hearing of July 22nd, she neither confirmed or denied. There were also claims made that there were no K-9 units present, which is a standard procedure for Secret Service. Why are there so many standard procedures breached at this particular rally where there was an attempt to assassinate Donald Trump? Multiple reports reveal the identified shooter, Thomas Crooks, was seen on the premise approximately 1 hour before President Trump spoke with a rangefinder and a backpack. Then, law enforcement lost track of him? Reports that Crooks' position on the roof placed him as few as 200 yards away from President Trump's platform and as much as 500 yards, with a later report that he was actually 360 to 393 yards away. In any event, he was well within the range for success, given the type of firearm and experience Crooks had. Dan Bongino, former Secret Serviceman assigned to presidential protection, reported evidence of text messages exchanged an hour before the shooting that local police told Secret Service about seeing the shooter, Thomas Crooks, but Secret Service didn't act on that information. It's possible the threat of Crooks was identified as much as an hour before President Trump took stage. Bongino stated in addition to seeing Crooks on the roof of a building, at least 10 people have come forward to report a figure on the water tower. However, this is yet to be confirmed. Bongino further stated that secret security counter-snipers had Crooks in their sights 20 minutes before the shooting began. This leaves the question why Crooks wasn't taken out after the first shot. Video has surfaced showing Secret Service had full view of the shooter at the Butler rally, whereas reports of Secret Service agents being told to stand down are not confirmed. Investigations are rampant about the number of shooters, the number of guns, and the number of shots. Dan Bongino has said there was only one shooter, but later video and reports seem to indicate there could have been 2 shooters. CNN reported that there were 2 different guns, and based on the audio of the shots fired, some believe there could be 3 guns. About the number of shots fired, including the one that took out Crooks, preliminary reports reveal as few as 9 and as many as 11. Time will tell. FBI investigations after the event has reported the shooter, Crooks, acted on his own. I find that highly unlikely. Eyewitnesses are coming forward, adding credibility to the possibility of at least one other shooter. In addition, it's become known that Iran had plans to assassinate President Trump, providing more potential that Crooks was not acting on his own. Add to that The FBI has revealed Crooks had 3 offshore bank accounts, and it begs the question, was Crooks paid or bribed to assassinate President Trump? Other questions. Why was Truth Social in the news revealing that the stock market had been shorting its stock? Contrast this to the fact that Truth Social's stock market surged because of President Trump surviving the assassination ordeal, and we're left wondering. And again, why was CNN only and ever present at this rally to live stream it? And why the failure on the part of the Secret Service? You probably already know the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle, admitted during the hearing on July 22nd that the security of July 13th constituted the most significant operational failure in decades. Then, on Tuesday, July 23rd, Cheadle resigned. I can't help but wonder if the deep state planned the assassination and the investigation with intentions of Kimberly Cheadle being the fall guy and Thomas Crooks being the patsy. Some people, including Derek Johnson, believe the whole incident was a psyop, whereas I have more reason to consider it a false flag event. Johnny Enlow stated that 1/3 of Democrats and 1/3 of Republicans in Congress believe it was a setup. Again, time will tell. Based on much prophecy from God through various trusted prophets, the truth will be revealed, and we will be shocked to learn the truth about this whole assassination scene. And while the world is still reeling from the events of July 13th, we have the highly successful RNC in contrast to the disruption of the DNC with the resignation of Biden as a Democrat presidential candidate. At the RNC, held a few days after the attempted assassination of Trump, he made an unexpected appearance to tremendous applause and welcome by the crowd. We saw a much different demeanor from President Trump as he entered the RNC than we ever have. And Peter Navarro was released from prison that same day and also attended the convention, receiving a most warm welcome. Conversely, the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle, made an unexpected visit to the RNC and was not at all welcomed by many who hounded her for answers about the performance of the Secret Service at the rally. Tucker Carlson gave a very compelling speech at the RNC. If you haven't heard it, use the link in the show notes. The atmosphere at the RNC was unlike any other Republican convention, which I find exceedingly revealing, giving me even more reasons for being hopeful about our future. That's not to say we won't encounter things becoming much darker before they get better. You may have heard about widespread emergency lines being down in several states due to a major Microsoft and CrowdStrike tech outage, sparking chaos around the world. The United States Emergency Alert System on Friday the 19th said a number of 911 lines in multiple states were down. This included Alaska, Ohio, New Hampshire, Oregon, and more. This seriously impacted several 911 call centers, hospitals, airports, and emergency management systems. The White House National Security Council reported they were looking into the disruption that impacted businesses, hospitals, and airlines worldwide. Over half of Fortune 500 companies use CrowdStrike software. Kieran Martin, professor at Oxford University's Bavlatnik School of Government and former head of the UK National Cybersecurity Centre, said over half of Fortune 500 companies use CrowdStrike software, and this was a very, very uncomfortable illustration of the fragility of the world's core internet infrastructure. Reports are the issues weren't caused by cyber attacks or malicious actors. However, some on social media are convinced this was a successful test run for the real thing we should expect in November to steal the elections. Lastly, before I share my interview with Donne Clement Petruska, let me help us identify some issues surrounding Biden's step down as presidential candidate and the resulting matters. Many have called for the 25th Amendment to be invoked to prevent Biden from fulfilling his term as president. Many prophets have made clear Biden would be removed from office. In fact, both Amanda Grace and Julie Green have given prophecies about Biden not completing his term as early as 3 years ago. This means, of course, that as VP, Kamala Harris would step in as president to finish Biden's term, and the position of VP becomes vacant. A vacancy in the office of the vice president may be filled by a nomination of the president and must be confirmed by a majority vote in both houses of Congress. This means Kamala gets to nominate a new vice president. It's likely that the nomination for this would be the same as her selection of her VP running mate for the 2024 presidential race. According to CNN, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and Arizona Senator Mark Kelly are among the Democrats who have been asked to submit information to be considered. At this point, with Harris as the new Democratic presidential nominee, she has inherited the Biden campaign war chest. She was the only one the Democrats could name as candidate and seamlessly acquire these funds. Reports are she received an additional $81 million in record time. We must know those who support this ticket are in favor of a one-world government, and they are funding this to prevent them from losing power and control. Prophets Amanda Grace and Dr. Patricia Green both have used the term Manchurian president when talking about Biden and the Democratic candidate for the 2024 election. This is a term that means a puppet president who is controlled. There has been much speculation that Biden has been the puppet president under Obama's control. If so, we have every reason to believe that Harris or any other person assigned to the DNC ticket will also be Manchurian politicians under control of the deep state working for a one-world government. I hope staunch Democrats who vote in the 2024 presidential election understand this. Okay, having sufficiently covered all the major events of our day, which has significantly added to the length of this podcast, let's now find the hope God has told us to hold on to while we live through His intervention as He brings His judgment and justice to bear before our very eyes. Please note, my interview with Donne Clement Petruska was recorded on July 10th, long before any of the current events. Even so, what she shared in the interview is still timely for all of us today. Here's part 2 of my interview with Donne.
You know, there's a big problem in the West, and our enemies, and this is Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, are very happy right now. I'm seeing them, like for instance, Putin has done a world tour. I mean, he's arms open to Modi in India, arms open in North Korea. And so the weakness in the West is being highlighted by our enemies, and that is dangerous for us, because one thing people need to remember is no matter what great things they think Putin is doing, he will bomb us, and he does not care about us. He cares about Russia, as he should. But Dad had a very big warning about this. He said that he saw a nuclear war that nobody wanted, but nobody had the wisdom to stop it. And he was really encouraging people to pray against that. And he was warning people about a hand extended from Russia that would betray us. And so I'm in a situation right now where it's a little bit difficult, because some conservative, especially conservative people, are saying, but look at all the, he's doing the right things. He's calling out the bad things that we don't agree with that are happening in the West. But we have to remember that he's using that to his advantage. And also, when my dad prophesied about Putin, he said that what God said, I have hardened your heart, King Putin. So it's for a purpose. Mm-hmm. And really what is happening here is that a mirror has been turned to us. And that mirror is reflecting, this is what we look like. We're arresting our political opponents and putting them in jail. That's the thing we always shouted at the communists for doing. Right. Now we're doing the very same thing. So Putin actually has a leg to stand on here. He can say, look at what you accused us of these things, and here you're doing them. Right. So it really was a mirror turned to the West. And it's very important that we see even the hard things. Mm-hmm. And God this is part of the boot camp, is actually being able to see the truth. Do you remember that dress? It was a picture of a dress that came out, I think it must have been 2015, the dress. And some people saw gold and white, right, and some people saw black and blue. For instance, I have only ever seen that dress as gold and white. But for instance, my dad saw black and blue. My mother saw gold, and we've never seen anything different. We're looking at the same image. Mm-hmm. It's not like a Photoshop trick where I've texted the picture to some. We're all looking together, and I'm saying I see white and gold, and he's saying I see black and blue. And so I look at things like that happened, and whatever's really going on with that dress and how, I don't know, but it's a good example of the situation we're in, where really we have two sides, that one side is saying, I see gold and white, and the other side saying, but I see black and blue. And really nobody's lying. And so it's quite complex what's going on. I remember my dad prophesying February 22nd, 2014. He said, or God said, a veil has been placed upon this nation, and I did it. Now, why would God put a veil over the nation? What does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
I always found that to be a strange, it was an uncharacteristic thing for my dad to prophesy, to say that. And when I look at what we're going through right now, it's almost like we're being forced. We're being forced to look at some very difficult things. If you see what has been done to children,
Mm-hmm.
I can't. Abortion alone is enough, but if you look at the trafficking and the molestation and the UN, where my dad said the UN would be caught with their pants down, that they were a stench to God's nostrils. The head of the UN last year came out and said, well, no, it's called minor attracted persons.
Right, right.
And if you don't accept that, then you won't be accepted. And I'm thinking, my goodness, like, what's the matter with these people?
Right.
That an organization like the UN would get up and say something like that, announce that as a thing. And then I look at Islam. And this is a big problem. This is something my dad, he called it Baal Allah, the spirit that's controlling them, is going back to Baal. And, in Islam, they have child marriages all the time. So you see an infiltration of this religion and a taking over of the West through migration, and then taking over areas, and then they just take it over, and then they're all living under Sharia law and assaulting any of the native people who live in these regions. And this has happened all over the world. We saw it happen in Iran many years ago, and you see the difference. If you go back pre-1979 to Iran, all the women are dressed like us. Nobody's got headscarves and covered their faces. And then after that, just completely covered. So there are some difficult things that God is needing us to see.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there's a challenge, not only to our faith, but to our ability to reach one another and communicate with one another. And then there's another side of it where, if you remember, Jesus said, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man returns. Well, you go back to the days of Noah, what was going on? Well, you had Nephilim giants, you had angels, the watchers, that whole story. I don't know how much people listening know the story, but it's very interesting. It's not in the Bible.
Book of Enoch.
But the Book of Enoch is there, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we're finding that it is relevant in these times. And if you can look at, okay, well, what was going on in the days of Noah? They were messing with genetics.
Right.
If you look in history, you look through history, like the Greeks, for instance, they have like half human, half animals. You know that the watchers lay with the women of earth, and this is in the Bible. And this is where the Nephilim, the giants, came from.
Right.
And then you look at the World Economic Forum today. What are they doing? Genetic editing. That's the big thing that Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum goes on and on about. The genetic editing. We can fix all these things. You have Yuval Noah Harari saying, oh, well, what God made, that was just organic. Like, we've made it better than God. That attitude is well, first of all, it's blasphemous, but it is reflective. If you can look at, okay, days of Noah, this was happening, and it is seeming that we're coming to that time if the same things are happening. And then if you remember at the Tower of Babel, when they were trying to build the tower to heaven,
to basically displace God.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What did God do? He separated their languages so that they could not communicate. So I think that there's a side of this that God has allowed there to be that inability to communicate, because there really is. If you look between the left and the right, for instance, and this is all across the West, they can't even talk to each other. Mm-hmm. We can't have a conversation without people being just going into a rage. And of course, a lot of that is demonic, and there's a manifestation of evil like we've never seen before. Never seen before. I've never seen anything like this. Because I've been around that kind of stuff my whole life. I traveled as a child with my dad. We went to all kinds of churches. I've seen demons coming out of people. I've seen scary things. This is something that, might have been isolated here and there. We see it just rampant. If you look at what happened in San Francisco with the Pride Parade and the absolute debauchery that was happening in the streets in front of children. Mm-hmm. And there's a definite, as soon as the devil gets enough of a hold, there is instantly the corruption of God's creation in the human form. So you see children's bodies being mutilated, as well as the innocent. The innocent are being just completely exploited. It is disgusting.
It absolutely is. And one of the things that we need to do with this particular podcast, because everything you just said is true. I mean, the evil and corruption is even more wicked and intense than what you have just given a highlight to.
It is.
And this definitely is a test of our faith. I mean, how else can God fortify his people to have a stronger faith except to give us opposition?
Yes, that's exactly the point I was making.
Okay, well then let me have you take it from here.
The whole reason for all of this, the veil, the miscommunication, is that he doesn't want us to rely on anyone but him. This is how the prophetic works. Like I was talking about in the beginning, you recognize his voice. God needs an army of people who can all recognize his voice and be led by him. Something my dad prophesied is that this move of the Spirit that will happen, he didn't even want to call it a revival. He said it was beyond a revival. That it would not come from one denomination, one church, one minister, one prophet, one anything. That it would come through all. It couldn't be attributed to, for instance, Azusa Street can be attributed to a group of people. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
This, he said, you would not be able to do that, because it would be something that wouldn't be coming out of all of us, because we were being driven by his voice and guided by his voice. And so in order to have an army capable of that, you have to be trained in the prophetic, which is why I think you have someone like my dad that God brought to the table beforehand, prophesying the things before it all started. And then my dad was taken out. Now, I'm upset that it happened that way. I'm still mad at God about it. But I understand why. Because he didn't live to become a part of the picking of sides, even though, he obviously was a conservative. It wasn't like it is now.
Right.
And so he wasn't there to pick a side in this or get too invested in this argument. And some of the arguments didn't even exist until after he died, but he prophesied about it. So it's not just in the main prophecies, it's woven throughout all of it. Is that he brought us a prophetic voice, and my dad and others, to prepare us for this time. And my dad even said, you will say from the north to the south to the east to west of your land, nothing like this has ever happened before. And we truly are saying that.
Right.
In good ways and for good and bad. And the one thing that God showed him about this, he said, this is good for you, America, because it's going to propel you and you will be ready for the next. And what he saw was death to debt. We are in more debt than we've ever been. So this is a complete counter to exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing more debt. We don't even know how, we can't even count to these numbers, let alone pay it.
Right.
So death to debt, but he saw the discovery of something, and it would come with energy, a discovery of energy that would come from the earth, I guess, because there was different ways he saw this, through earthquakes and volcanoes and things. It wouldn't be that destructive as far as loss of life, but that something, the earth will yield its produce, is the way he said it, yield its produce, and that from the earth we would find something that would give us this energy, the big E that he saw. And I believe that these things are connected, the death to debt and the energy, because he saw the countries that we see now with BRICS rising up, no more dollar, they're going to be gold backed. He saw all of that, all of that coming. And God has given us the sort of little, just enough to see that can give us just enough faith, but he's not giving us too much. And what he showed my dad was that, I'll quote him, while these cats and dogs are fighting, America will prosper. So what he saw was that these countries will start to turn against one another. So you have Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. He saw Iran and North Korea bashing their heads together. I talked about this 7-8 years ago, and people were like, well, that's stupid. Why would Iran and North Korea ever bash their heads together? Your dad didn't know what he was talking about. I hear a lot of that. Well, now we're 8 years in the future, and those countries are allied against us, against the West,
Right.
with a currency they want to, and while we're in debt, while our president has dementia. That's so scary to me too. But he saw that they would turn on one another, and that while these cats and dogs are fighting, America will prosper. And that's what God showed him. And so at this stage, it looks to me like that we will find a solution to the energy problem. Dad said he saw that when you would drive a car, you would be able to choose the energy.
Huh.
So you could do gas, or you could do electric, or there were others. He said there were buttons he saw on a car, and you could just choose how you were going to run the car. And so, and he saw cures for diseases as well: Alzheimer's, autism, diabetes, cancer, brain and neurological disorders. He saw cures, healing, but actual cures for these things. And so we hear about, for instance, autism. My son is autistic. They say that the autism could be caused from vaccines. And if that, for instance, if they were able to figure that out and fix that, you wouldn't have the autism problem anymore. So I think things like that are going to happen from the exposures of what's been going on, all of it having to do, most of it having to do with greed is what he saw. And these would be solved. So if we can solve this problem, all those other things get solved.
Right.
Our debt, dealing with the energy problem, because whatever happens will give us enough money that we'll be able to clear our debt. And whatever they are planning in the East with BRICS will fall apart. The World Economic Forum, he saw them as being like a Fourth Reich, the rise of a Fourth Reich. And if you think of Mengele and what he was doing to children and the medical experimenting that was going on, then you look at the World Economic Forum and the organizations like that, it's all global too. So then we can go into eschatology, which we won't do right now. But my mom's the person to talk to about that stuff anyway. But it's all connecting together.
Donné expressed how we can look at the very same thing and see it two different ways, and she used what's simply known as the dress as an example. The scientific reasons for seeing the same dress differently has to do with our preconceived ideas about lighting. This points out how our preconceived ideas can impact our conclusions, further emphasizing a point I made a couple times early on about the importance of critical thinking, especially in these times. If you don't know about the dress, you'll find a link to a Wikipedia explanation so you can learn more. She also shared how her father emphasized death to debt. Again, if you've not heard my podcast with Dr. Scott Young about Nasara or Jasara, I encourage you to do so. You'll find links to those two shows in the show notes as well. I've noted the prophetic words God is providing his children in these very days are for these days. They are not words about a time in the future, but prophecy specific for right now. I have never seen that before. For example, God spoke through Julie Green on July 22nd, 2024, about the very specific events we are living in right now. He clearly wants us to be prepared and not to become fearful by what we will experience. In part, God said, and I quote, "You are about to see more disruptions. I've cut the lines of communications of your enemy. There will be more disruptions with businesses, flights, internet, and phone services. Things will look one way when they are another. You saw how the world almost stood still with the communication breakdown." He's referring to Thursday, the 19th of July. "When the world nearly came to a standstill. Hospitals, banks, and many things were affected on that day. You see how vulnerable things are without me. Man-made inventions and technology is nothing compared to me. Your enemies are coming after you with more attacks, malice, hatred, and chaos, but it will not happen as they want. I am allowing this nation to see how vulnerable you are without my protection, but you have my protection now. You have to trust and believe me now more than ever." End quote. You'll definitely want to see the entire video, so use the link in the show notes to see Julie Green's prophecies and instructions of July 22nd, 2024. Given all that God has revealed through his prophets, given all the world events, especially since 2020, I'm convinced we are on the cusp of the greatest intervention of God ever, beginning with the judgment of evil and concluding with God's justice and rewards for the faithful that will be evident with the greatest revival and restoration the world has ever seen. Next week, I'll bring you part 3, which is the final with Donne Clement Petruska for this particular interview. I hope you remember to share this podcast with others so they can experience a certain encouragement and confident hope God wants for His children, especially as we live through these increasingly intense times. Before I close, I have even more information about the trip to Greece that I hope to make happen in 2025. We are looking at traveling in the month of October, and I'm interviewing 3 highly recommended Christian travel tour companies at this present time to get the best deal. What I'm looking at is a tour group of about 30 people, a good size to work with, and we already have about 10 people who've expressed interest. We'll be landing in Athens and then be escorted on a tour we can call the Steps of Paul. Each of us need to get our own air travel to Athens International Airport, arriving on what we will consider day 1. Hotel accommodations, ground transportation, and some meals are included from day 1 through day 7, when we'll return to Athens so you can catch your return flight home. We want to plan one night where we can all dine together in a banquet room or some such thing, allowing us the opportunity to worship together and learn together. The cost for the tour is estimated to be about $3,000 per person. Again, that's just an early advance estimate. However, we won't know the actual cost until the details are agreed upon. I would like to have the details agreed upon by the end of February 2025, about 8 months ahead of time, so people can make definitive plans. So, if you think you'd like to be part of the Faith to Live By Christian Tour with me in Greece in 2025, just send me an email with the word Greece in the subject line and the number of people that you expect to be in your party in the body of the email. My email is faithtoliveby@PamelaChristianMinistries.com. There is no commitment or obligation from you at this point. You're just expressing interest. And when it comes closer to time to get confirmations, around January or February, then we'll talk about the deposits, the final payments, the travel insurance, and more. Again, if you want me to put together a Christian tour for 2025 to Greece, send me an email to faithtoliveby@PamelaChristianMinistries.com with the words Greece Tour in the subject line and the number of people you would bring in the body of the email if the trip becomes a reality. In the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. If you like what you hear from me with this podcast, I highly recommend my book series, my award-winning blog, connecting with me on social media where I can cover many more topics than I can with this weekly podcast. Also, consider signing up for my certificate course in apologetics. My aim with that course is to help people learn how to not only use apologetics to share truth with others, but to help Christian leaders incorporate apologetics into their respective ministries so many more Christians know how to share their faith. You know, my whole goal with this podcast is to help people discover and live in life-giving truth and to experience all the hope truth provides. You can, and I hope you do, personally share truth with others. But have you thought about how many more people you could reach by partnering with me? Help me grow this podcast, get my books into more people's hands, and talk me up to others to get more speaking engagements and increase this podcast audience. Then together as partners, we will be making a much greater impact than we can on our own. There are several ways you can choose to partner with me. Certainly telling others about me and my ministry along with prayers is among the top of the list. There's nothing more powerful than word-of-mouth endorsement or personal referrals. Buying my books and products is another way. All of my books in my Faith to Live By series were written to help people better understand the Christian faith and how to successfully live it out. Visit my website and get any or all of these books with a deep 20% discount by using the word TRUTH, T-R-U-T-H, at checkout. I also welcome donations, but for now they're not tax deductible. However, I'm working on that for you, so listen in the weeks to come to learn more to be able to support me through donations that hopefully will be tax deductible. Supporting the businesses I feature as affiliate partners is yet another way you can partner with me. I seek to find affiliates who can offer you goods and services you need, and I have some very exciting money-saving, America First goods and services you won't want to miss out on. I have a new affiliate partner who has amazing products that can help you with a number of different ailments. It's called QE Strong. Using the frequency of quantum energy, their products have helped hundreds of people overcome issues of pain, anxiety, sleeplessness, and more. I have recently conducted an interview with Rob Renee, the founder, and I encourage you to listen to that in order to learn more. Use the promo code FTLB at checkout to get an additional 15% discount on top of the discounts they already provide. Also, if you're like me, you're tired of paying very high prices for cable television, and you've been waiting to find the right company who shares your values to replace your cable service. Well, I found it. It's called Q Streaming. That's CUE Streaming. They provide over 3,000 channels, including live TV with local stations from across the United States networks, sports networks, movie networks, and pay-per-view events. You get all of that for about half what most cable companies charge, and there's no contract, just a monthly subscription. Visit faithtoliveby.myqstreaming.com. Look around and sign up to start viewing the programs you like at a fraction of what you're paying now, all while you are supporting a Christian-owned and operated company that exclusively uses word-of-mouth advertising so as not to spend money on commercial advertisement that supports the woke movement. And don't forget, when it comes to your health, I have 2 different affiliate partners, Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack Supplements and Cup of Health. Cup of Health is dedicated to helping us detoxify our bodies and get to an optimal and healthy weight. I personally love their Java Boost drink, and I think you will too. So check out all their products, and be sure to use my promo code at checkout, FTLB, and they also will offer a 20% discount on all the products. Visit cupofhealth.com. Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements contain zinc, quercetin, and vitamins C and D, which are formulated in just the right amounts to help you boost your immune system. Your immune system can be weakened by over 300 different primary immunodeficiency disorders, poor diet, lack of sleep, and adverse reactions to vaccines. I'm personally taking the supplement, and I can tell you I've been around many people who have had COVID and other ailments, and I have not been sick. Use the link in the show notes or go to his website and use the promo code FTLB to receive a 5% coupon discount. And if you choose to become a subscriber, you can receive a 10% discount each and every month. And regarding your finances, I want you to know about Dr. Kirk Elliott. He's a personal wealth advisor. I recently conducted another interview with Kirk that I especially want you to hear in light of the present-day banking system and economic uncertainty. Dr. Elliott offers free consultations to learn more about your personal considerations and to decide what might be a good strategy for you and your financial goals. Call Kirk at 1-720-605-3900 or contact him and his team using the link in the show notes. Again, his and all my affiliate partners' contact details are in the show notes. Of course, you need to do your own due diligence to make your own decisions what to purchase, but to help you, I am researching companies, interviewing their representatives, and using their products or services myself to provide you with any personal recommendation I can. When you purchase my books, products, or services, or products and services from any of my affiliates, you get something you want, and at the same time, you support me. It's truly a benefit for us all. So shop for yourself, or shop to get gifts for friends and family. Your support is greatly appreciated. Again, if this ministry has blessed you in any way, please consider partnering with me and my vision to bring truth to as many people as possible. Consider getting my award-winning books available from my website. The series is also called Faith to Live By, and when you purchase through my web store, be sure to use the promo code TRUTH, T-R-U-T-H, to get a 20% discount on your entire order. I'd also appreciate you letting me know how this podcast impacts you and what you're doing now in response to the equipping you've received through me. My email is faithtoliveby@PamelaChristianMinistries.com. If you like the content and the resource material I bring with this podcast, you'll find much more by connecting with me through my blog. In fact, my blog has been awarded 2 unsolicited awards for Christian content. And I'm also very active on social media. I can cover many more topics there than I can with this weekly podcast. You can also subscribe to my complimentary bi-monthly e-newsletter. As a new subscriber, you can choose one of 3 gifts I offer in appreciation for your subscription. Subscribing will make you a preferred member where you'll receive special announcements and offers not available to others. And by subscribing, should anything happen to my podcast, and the internet is really volatile right now, I'll have a way to contact you so we can stay in touch. To receive even more, please be sure to check out my dedicated podcast listeners page called Beyond the Podcast. Here's where we can connect exclusively, and you can download complimentary devotionals, resources, and more. Depending upon where you listen to my podcast, if you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, Google, or wherever these features are available. Your review helps the show reach more people and spread the gospel, and it helps people learn how to better apply their Christian faith. I hope you'll join me next week and tell your friends and family to listen right here on Faith to Live By, where we learn how to gain spiritual victory over life's issues. Until next week, I'm Pam Christian, asking you to remember Christ died for us. The least we can do is live for Him.